Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm speaking from the HEALEY Center for ALS and Mass General. Today is it's our weekly platform trial webinar updates, and I'm just giving everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. I see that the audience is gathering. Thank you so much for all of you. As always, we recognize familiar names, and it's great to see people come back and follow this series, but also welcome to everyone who may be new. And as always, these webinars are recorded, so you can feel free to share the recordings with your friends and families. If they have any questions, they can always join. We're here on a weekly basis. So if we can go to the next slide. For today's webinar, we have a special guest. I'm just so excited to welcome Dr. Kelly Gwathmey from Viginia Commonwealth. If you don't mind, I'll say that we met a few years ago when you were at MGH, which is wonderful. Great that you're now leading the ALS team at VCU. And so I'll turn it over to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paganoni, for the kind invitation to present our amazing clinic today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a picture of part of my amazing ALS clinic team on the left, and then a beautiful picture of our short pump pavilion, which is where our multidisciplinary ALS clinic is housed. It's actually in the suburbs of Richmond, so it's very patient-centric, good parking, and we have tons of space for our patients, including an infusion center, lab, as well as research space. And next slide, please. And then this is most of the team. We recruited Dr. Chiwa Fan from Johns Hopkins. She started with us in August of last year, and she is helping out in the ALS clinic as well. We have our amazing nurse navigator, Michelle, Paula, my respiratory therapist, Rebecca, my dietitian, Kira, our speech language pathologist, Mandy, our physical therapist, Ashley, our occupational therapist, and our social worker, Lavon, my research coordinator. Also have Kim Clater. We just recruited our second dedicated ALS research coordinator. Her picture hasn't been taken yet. And Chelsea, our genetic counselor. We also have access to palliative care. And so girl power, lots of women on this page. Next slide, please. And so just some quick facts about our clinic. We see on average about 160 to 175 active patients at any time. This includes our primary lateral sclerosis patients, of whom we have quite a few. We have a full day of ALS clinic every single Tuesday, and then one rapid access clinic monthly. The increase in the number of referrals has almost tripled in the last few years, which is why we've expanded to a full day every week and an additional rapid access clinic once a month. Next slide, please. And then our clinic is supported by the ALS Association, the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and then we do have an ALS specific foundation called Harper's Hope that helps to support our staff. Next slide. And then we have 3 active drug trials, including, of course, HEALEY Platform, and we were activated for both the Master Platform study and Regimen E on the 4th of February. We have 1 patient enrolled in Regimen E and 1 patient in screening for the Master. And next, please. And so we have 2 ongoing natural history studies, 1 in ALS and 1 in PLS, and several investigator-initiated studies, including a very large-scale epidemiological study of ALS in Virginia, and that was in collaboration with the ALS Association. With that, I will, I think, turn it over to you, Sabrina.
Thank you so much. And may I ask if that's okay? I think it's helpful to explain how our ALS clinics supported. You mentioned that there is support from different groups. Maybe I wonder if you may expand on that for our audience to understand, since you moved from MGH and you basically took leadership of this particular clinic with great success and expansion, as you just described. How does that work?
Right, absolutely. So I've been at VCU just since the very beginning of 2019. I was actually on faculty at UVA for 6 years leading up to that, and a co-director of the clinic there. And so our structure is a little bit different here at VCU. We do rely heavily actually on foundation money to support a number of our staff, including our dietitian, our occupational therapist, our genetic counselor. Some of our other staff are funded mostly out of our MDA grant and our funding from the ALS Association. our nurse and social worker are supported by our healthcare system.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's very helpful. So essentially, when people with ALS go to clinic, basically there's some insurance reimbursement through Medicare or regular private insurance that goes to the physicians mostly. And then again, the other staff members are supported by a variety of sources that depend on the location. Would you say that that's a fair summary?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, the insurance pretty much covers the physician's portion of the visit. Yeah, the rest of it we cover either internally or through foundation money.
Exactly, and so that's why, you know, foundations and philanthropy or other sources of support are really critical to the you know, possibility of providing multidisciplinary care.
Absolutely, we wouldn't be able to do it without it. It keeps the lights on for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, moving forward, you know, every week we like to have guest speakers, and you know, great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if anyone has questions about your site, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box of the Zoom platform. Moving on to our usual weekly updates about the platform trial. If you can go to the next slide. As people know, if you have been following us, or you know, just as a brief summary, as you know, we have been testing several drugs as part of this perpetual adaptive trial, and over time we expanded in terms of number of drugs that are included and number of sites. Actually, I believe, Dr. Gwathmey, that you joined us for the current study, regimen E, or the trialose regimen. And because, you know, again, there was such great demand and so many new people, again, opening and expanding new centers, which is great, that we really wanted to make the trial available in more locations. So next slide, just for an update on where we stand. So right now we are closing out the previous group of regimens A through D. And so we expect to have the results in 2022. They're not gonna all come out sort of, you know, at the same time. It's gonna be sort of there's going to be different results that are gonna be released depending on when they become available. We're gonna have top line results for the first group, and they're projected in July through September, depending on kind of the timelines of the last few participants and some of the regulatory activities. And then for sure, we're going to have study reports later this year. So for sure, by the end of the year, we're going to have detailed results for regimens A through D. And then before then, over the summer, end of summer, we expect to have top line results as well. That's for regimens A through D, the first 4 drugs. Next slide. And now we are also enrolling at all the new sites, such as VCU. We are enrolling participants in regimen E. So far, 45 people have signed informed consent, and 31 people have been randomized within the regimen, meaning that they are either on active or placebo in that regimen, with a ratio of 3:1 in favor of active. We received a question about why are these numbers different? Why do we have more people that have signed informed consent compared to people that are actually receiving drug? And that's a great question. So the reason being that when somebody joins the platform trial, they have to go through a series of screening procedures to make sure that they can safely participate. And so there is a period of time that's up to six weeks, although we try to shorten it, but it could be potentially up to 6 weeks when they are in screening. And so again, 45 people have been screened, but of those, 31 have already moved forward and they are receiving study drug at this point. So thank you so much for your participation. As you know, we really are eager to enroll in more people in this regimen, so that we can have the results of the 5th regimen soon, hopefully as soon as possible. Next slide. If you can, next, yeah, that's a list of the 28 sites that are currently activated for regimen E, including VCU. So thank you so much to all the sites that have joined so far, but we are continuing to add more sites. Next slide. The next group of sites that we think will be activated is listed on this slide. So definitely we're excited to add them as well. Next. If you want to check the status of your site, please go on our website and it's listed here. Next slide. And as always, feel free to send any questions that you may have to Catherine or Alison. Catherine is here with us today, and she can help you with any questions outside of the webinar times. And next week, we're going to have Peter Foss, the president of ALS Finding a Cure, join us as a guest speaker. ALS Finding a Cure is a great organization that's helping to support the trial. So we're really happy to have him on this webinar. Next. And as always, you know, we love to get your ideas and questions ahead of time. So if you have any suggestions in terms of topics or special requests, please feel free to send them along. I do want to point out that if you want to have more information about the drug that we're testing right now, Regimen E, we do have a previous webinar recorded on that topic specifically. And with that, I think we can stop sharing the slides. And we can start taking a few questions. So one question is about getting access to recordings of previous webinars. So maybe, Catherine, if you don't mind putting that in the chat. So first of all, in terms of these weekly webinars, they're all available on our website. In terms of the a separate webinar that was done, that we gave on April 14th for industry, I believe that the recording is available or can be requested. Catherine, could you help us find if it's already on our website, or if you can send it, if people want to contact Catherine, she can probably help you with that. A few other questions. So there's a question about expanded access. Do all 5 medication arms or the 5 regimens have an expanded access program? So I can tell you that so far, 3 out of 5 do have an expanded access program. And that's available at a total of 8 sites. And we do still have spots for some of these programs. We're working on adding more EAP options. I would say that I'm also applying to a grant to try to expand this EAP companion to the platform trial substantially. There is an NIH grant that was just published. And so actually I plan on asking all platform trial sites if they would be interested in being part of this, you know, assuming that we get the funding. So again, I will be applying with some colleagues to expand this, because, you know, again, we started based on philanthropy about a year ago for the first few regimens. And now we want to expand so that all regimens have an EAP and more sites can participate. So another question, what are the top line? What are the top line results expected to show, and what would happen after that? So when we say top line results, what we mean are essentially the most important analysis, which is basically will answer the questions: is this particular drug safe, and is this particular drug effective at slowing down ALS disease progression? So those are the questions that we want to answer. And as discussed in previous webinars, we designed the trial to be able to answer these questions in a sort of firm and solid way. So the steps will depend on whether the answer to these questions is positive or negative. So it will be customized to each regimen, because different regimens may have different results. So what's going to happen is in the very short term, we will write up a paper and write up all the reports with all the details. Top line results means sort of the most important analysis, but there's a lot of supporting analysis that have to go with it. That's why it takes a little bit of time to have everything available, but basically they will be disseminated, and then the next steps will depend on whether the results are positive or negative. So another question that's sort of connected to that: if a regimen is not effective, what would happen to the participants in that regimen? So I can tell you that, you know, this is actually not only a hypothetical question, but it actually happened in the context of this platform trial. We did find out that regimen A was not effective. And that's because we do have interim looks or periodic looks at the data that are done to increase the efficiency of the trial. In other words, we don't want to waste anyone's time to find out that the drug, is not effective. We want to find out if it's not effective. We want to find out as soon as possible. So we have built in these looks at periodic intervals, so that if that will tell us if a drug is not effective, we can stop the regimen right away. So that actually happened. And so what happened for the participants in that regimen, which was regimen A, is that if they were still eligible to re-enter the platform trial and go into another regimen, they could do so. If not, we are offering expanded access options. In fact, if any of you, is aware of anyone who terminated from regimen A, and if they're interested in expanded access, please have them contact us directly. We have actually already been contacted by some of the participants in regimen A, and for those who are interested, we are looking into expanded access options. So we are available for that. So what happens? So what happens if somebody develops a side effect to any drug? I don't know, Dr. Gwathmey, if you want to comment in general terms, in terms of what happens if somebody isn't in a clinical trial and develops a side effect.
Sure. I think it depends on what medication was started most recently. So there's sort of a process of elimination to try and determine if it is, related to the drug that was recently started or one of the medications we're prescribing. So, for example, if someone develops a side effect on riluzole, usually I'll go down to once a day dosing to see if that improves, or change the timing of it throughout the day. Sometimes we'll pause medications briefly to see if the side effect resolves. I mean, it could be potentially unrelated to whichever medication we're starting to. So there's a lot of sort of trial and error, I would say, when trying to determine if it's linked to something we're actually prescribing or in a clinical trial setting as well. It depends on what the side effect is and if we feel it's likely or unlikely to be related to the study drug.
Right. So for any questions, please contact your physician. I think the site investigator, like Dr. Gwathmey is the site investigator at Virginia, but every site has one specific physician investigator. The physician investigator will be the best source of information. Also, I wanted to ask you another question. So in general, how many infusions of a drug would one need to determine if someone is having a positive or negative effect? I know it's a general question.
A question in
we don't have data yet. Yeah, like, for example, for this particular infusion or other studies, I mean, in general, I guess, how long does it take for somebody to feel an effect in ALS clinical trials?
I think that's challenging because it depends on what the mechanism of action of the infusion is, right? So are we using this infusion to try to slow the progression of the drug, right? So at that point, potentially a patient wouldn't necessarily feel like there's benefit, but some drugs, patients might start to notice benefit shortly thereafter. So I think it just depends on really what the study drug is and how it's supposed to be working.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a question about, we've been getting this multiple times, and I'm happy to address that. So the question is, what happens if AMX35 is approved at the end of June? Will patients be able to take AMX35 and then enroll in the platform trial? Yeah, as discussed previously, our intent is absolutely to allow anyone to have access to standard of care. So if the standard of care changes, meaning a new drug is approved, such as AMX35, then people will have the opportunity to take that. That will be prescribed by their regular physician as part of standard of care, and then also enroll in the trial. Now, there are many unknowns that we don't know in terms of the approval timelines, the insurance reimbursement timelines. So obviously, as you may imagine, everyone in the ALS community, including clinics and physicians, etc., are all getting ready for all possible scenarios, especially in terms of clearing insurance questions and things like that. So, I wish I could give you an exact firm timeline and process. I can tell you that, that's the number one topic of discussion in ALS clinics among staff right now is, to get ready for that. But until we get there, some of the details, will not be completely known, or we have to kind of work through the process.
And we appreciate everyone's patience as we do so.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so there's a question. Can you tell us more about oral edaravone? Dr. Gwathmey, do you want to comment on the next steps for oral edaravone?
My understanding is we're awaiting to hear, whether or not it will be FDA approved. I don't know the exact date. Do you know, Sabrina?
It's May 12th.
Yeah,
Yes.
I knew it was right around the corner. So yes, we'll wait and hear if that is approved. And then, yeah, we'll see how that transition occurs for patients. I mean, presumably occurs for patients on infusions over to oral. And then, yeah, how we'll roll it out. I don't have any firm information on the process of how it's going to be rolled out in terms of prescribing, but I know that the company is getting ready.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's another top topic. Everyone is, getting ready for all scenarios. Question about one topic I mentioned earlier. We do periodic analysis of the drugs in the platform trial. I just want to clarify, there are two possible ways of doing this. You can do interim analysis for futility or lack of efficacy, and or you can do interim analysis for efficacy. Now, the names are similar, but the statistical methods are completely different, and the implications and the impact on the trial are completely different. And I'm going to summarize that. As of right now, every single drug in the platform trial is undergoing periodic looks or analysis for lack of efficacy, meaning that every 3 months, we analyze the data, and if a drug is not effective, that regimen will be stopped. The trial has the option to activate interim looks for efficacy, but so far, none of the regimen partners wanted to take advantage of that. Now, there are some good reasons for that, because this trial is already relatively short, only 6 months in terms of the placebo-controlled trial. Because of that, you basically, the interim looks for efficacy are a little bit more risky and don't necessarily buy you much time, because you have to use completely different statistical analysis that actually affect your p-value. And this is a little bit more technical, and perhaps when we have our statistician, Dr. Chibney, she can explain exactly why and how that affects the statistical calculations. But essentially, while doing the analysis that we are doing does not affect our statistical power, doing interim looks for efficacy would affect our statistical power. So it's a little bit of a calculation of risks and benefits that you want to do. And so far, the regimen partners, they were okay for doing the interim looks for lack of efficacy, but they didn't want to take the risk of lowering the statistical power by doing the checks for efficacy. It's a little bit in the weeds, I apologize. It's a very complicated topic. That said, essentially for now, we know that the way we have it set up right now, if a drug is not, it's clearly not effective, we're going to stop it prematurely. That's already one way of gaining efficiency from this trial. And we do it, there is an external body. So essentially, we, like, for example, myself or Dr. Gwathmey or Catherine or anyone else who's directly involved in the study, we need to remain blinded. So we cannot do this analysis. It's a completely separate group of statisticians that's firewalled from us that does it and just communicates to us only if, if we had to stop the regimen. So there's another question. So if you complete one regimen, could you have access to the other regimens? And so, yes, but the devil is in the details. So how would that happen? So if somebody completes one regimen, for example, they complete the 6 months on regimen X, they can then go back from the beginning and rescreen at the master protocol level and try another one. That's one option. Now, if somebody instead finishes a certain regimen and then, would like to go back to the master protocol, but is no longer eligible, then they wouldn't have that option. So for those individuals, we have created expanded access. That's the program that I described earlier. Expanded access is much more flexible. It's not really part of the platform trial. It's a companion to the platform trial. It's a separate program, but companion to it. And as part of that, we are able to enroll people who are not eligible for the platform trial itself. Dr. Gwathmey, what do you think about weight loss or weight gain? Do you consider, what are your thoughts clinically and also in the context of trials?
Well, I mean, clinically, I think it depends on what your baseline weight is. I mean, that's why we partner with a dietitian. For some patients, we don't want them to gain too much weight for mobility concerns and things like that. And so, but for a lot of patients are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so we're trying to encourage high calorie foods and adjust their tube feeds depending on how they're doing. And so that's, again, why we partner with a dietitian to try and find that sweet spot and guide our patients towards that. In the context of a clinical trial, I mean, again, it depends on the drug. Some of our drugs are weight-based in trials, and so we will have to adjust the dosing. If it's too much weight gain or too much weight loss, is that an adverse event potentially or related to the study drug? So we are keeping an eye on that as well.
Exactly, yeah. There's a few questions about regimen C, CNM-Au8, which is a drug manufactured by Clean Nanotechnology. And so the person who posted the comment says that Clean announced that they are planning another trial, another phase 3 trial. And so the question is, we were under the impression that the HEALEY trial is considered the registration trial. Why would they need to conduct another trial? Yeah, you're right. Both things are true. So the HEALEY trial is considered a registration trial. What that means is that if somebody runs the trial through the HEALEY platform, and if the results are positive and robust, the one trial could be considered enough to register a new drug. However, we don't know upfront what the results of each regimen will be. So they could be extremely positive, they could be extremely negative, or they could be good, but not enough for registration, not because of the design. The design is right on target, but the results may not be as convincing. So if the results are not as convincing because, for example, there is some benefit, but not too much, then you may need another trial. So some companies may correctly so also plan another trial in the event that the results are sort of mixed or not particularly convincing. So that's why, again, it's not sort of mutually exclusive that you do one or the other. It's, companies, rightly so, also plan for other trials, to cover all possibilities. Now, I would say that for a registration in the European Union, as of right now, they do need longer placebo-controlled trials. So that's another reason why, if somebody wants to also market the drug in Europe, Europe is now regulated by the FDA. It's regulated by the EMA, which is a different agency, the European Medicines Agency, and they've published that they consider, the minimum length of a trial 12 months, and I'm talking of a placebo-controlled trial of 12 months. But as you know, we worked hard with advocacy, including many people on this call, to make sure that the FDA would also accept shorter studies or 6 months placebo-controlled trials, because we really don't want to keep people on placebo for that long. So again, there are geographic differences. And so unfortunately, as of right now, to register a new drug in Europe, you need a longer trial. And another question is, assuming that there are good results for regimen C or any other regimen, really, when will the drug be available? Well, I can tell you that, all the companies that, I interact with, they really plan for success, and they really want to make sure that they have, the drug manufactured and the processes sort of lined up. That said, there are many unknowns, such as the timelines of FDA review, the outcome of the FDA review, and also even once a drug is on the market, because this is considered a rare disease, unfortunately, there are pre-authorization or administrative processes for insurance companies to approve a drug. And that's not driven by the trial or the company, that's driven by the system. So can you, just last question that we haven't addressed, Dr. Gwathmey, what do you think about combination of drugs? Do you think that patients will benefit from combinations?
I think it's likely that patients will benefit from a combination of therapies, because a lot of these therapies have different mechanisms of action, and we feel that ALS is sort of a final common pathway of a lot of things that can go wrong. So if we target these different things that can go wrong in the cell, then maybe together they'll have a synergistic benefit. So I do think that's potentially the future. And to some extent, we're doing that already for our patients that are on a combination of edaravone and riluzole, right? So
exactly. And that's exactly how we would want the platform trial to behave in the future. Let's say that, you know, AMX35 is approved and or one of these regimens is positive, then we're going to start building combinations. So all the previously treated, all the previously tested drugs that are positive will be included. And so you can imagine, you know, somebody coming in regimen X in 2023, for example, they may be on riluzole, oral Radicava, AMX35, maybe one of these drugs from one of the first regimens. So that's the idea. That's how the trial will build on external successes, but hopefully internal successes as well. Great. Thank you so much. I think we got most of the questions. And as always, it's really a pleasure to be here with you every week. Please keep sending questions to Catherine, and we'll be here again next week. Huge thanks to Dr. Gwathmey. I would love to have you back. And I'm really sorry you are no longer at MGH, but I'm glad to see that you're doing such good work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.